Good morning and welcome to UPN Focus. I'm your host, Milt Thompson, and today we're going to talk about crime, the judicial system, all the things that go on with lawyers behind the scenes. We're going to do that with our very special guest, who is the Chief Public Defender of the Marion County Courts, David Cook. David, welcome to our show.
Thanks, Milt. It's great to be here.
David, you know, a long time ago we had a chance to work together, and that was on the other side of the coin in the prosecutor's office, and you were trying a lot of notorious cases, death cases, ones that had a lot of publicity to them, and 10, 11, 12 years later you make the switch. What caused you to make the switch?
Well, as we've talked earlier, I had no professional epiphany about this change. After many years of prosecution and trying high visibility cases and doing death penalty litigation, got a little bit rounded off the edges and ready to kind of change my professional practice. I went into private practice thinking that I'd maybe be more involved in civil work and get out of the criminal arena a little bit. My reputation apparently did not allow me to do that. Ended up with an active criminal defense practice, doing a lot of death penalty litigation. Next thing you know, I'm director of the Marion County Public Defender's Agency. So it all fit, and it's appropriate for where I am right now professionally.
Well, you know, you and I might understand, you know, the legal differences and subtleties between being an advocate, which is an obligation as lawyers on one side of the issue or the other. But, you know, I'm not sure that people in our audience understand. Though some of them will say, well, that Dave Cook's a turncoat now. Now he's out for the bad guys. He's not out for the good guys. What are the major differences between prosecution and defense as you see it?
Well, there are many major differences between those types of representation, but the real issue here, and you and I both know this, that our system of justice is designed so that the best opportunity that justice will be created if there are good prosecutors, good public defenders and defense lawyers, and good judges. So a person like both of us that worked one side of the fence, if you want to really call it that, understands that the system really does function better as long as there are good people in all the critical roles. So while I was a prosecutor, I had great respect for good defense lawyers. Things went better with good defense lawyers. A person had a better opportunity to have what we know as their day in court if they had a good defense lawyer. And the prosecution was better if they had a good defense lawyer, because if they did have an opportunity to have all the relevant issues raised that should be raised, and you still convicted them, those were cases that we didn't see come back from the appellate courts because they had their actual day in court.
David, this is grueling, tough work because you're really dealing with personal liberties, someone perhaps even being put to death by the state, on either side of the issue. What kind of personal toll does it take on you as you prepare to defend now those accused of these kind of crimes?
Well, that is a major part of the prosecution or defense, is the terrible responsibility that's involved either as a defense lawyer and being, for instance, sort of the sole bastion between that person and execution, or the prosecutor being the person that's charged with the responsibility of upholding that law and providing all the appropriate information. It takes a lot of toll, because you and I both know that to do those things, they're not 8 to 5 jobs. You leave a little bit of yourself in the courtroom every time you do one of those things. Because it is so demanding and the responsibilities are so great. So it does take a toll. It took a toll on me, and after 10.5 years I thought I'd take a break, but I didn't get the break I thought I was going to take.
Well, David, you've tried some cases where ultimately people were put to death.
Yes.
And did you ever get a chance to witness any of those deaths?
Actually, no, and I did that purposely. Either as a defense lawyer or as a prosecutor. I think, and there are many people that disagree with me on this, involving yourself in that stage or that process of that proceeding has a real opportunity and likelihood that it would affect the way you represented either that case or the next case. The important thing is that as a prosecutor you develop the appropriate information to convince the jury beyond a reasonable doubt of the guilt of the defendant, and made appropriate arguments at the penalty phase as to why the death sentence was an appropriate sentence in that regard. And the flip of that is true as the defense lawyer. if you are involved with the ultimate outcome of that, or if you have barriers because you've been there, you've witnessed it, and seen the tragedy of that actual event, I think that it would heavily influence the way you went about preparing your case, and you need to be isolated from that. That's my own personal and professional opinion. Many people would disagree with me on that.
Well, as a veteran of the system, have you noticed over the last 10, 12 years or so any major changes either in the laws or in the system or in how the system is perceived by the public that are notable?
Well, I think there's been some obvious changes as it relates to the criminal justice system and how the criminal justice system is attacking the problem of ever-increasing crime. The war on drugs has been very in the news and an important topic to every community across the United States. It's a very hot political topic. And what I've observed is that political reactions to these type of problems many times and oftentimes don't actually go to the heart of making or solving the problem. It is more reactive to it. Consequently, in the war on drugs, we've had mandatory sentencings for certain types of drug offenses that have created great inequities. Many young people are serving disproportionate criminal sentences right now because it has been the popular thing to do to create very tough laws on drugs. Our Fourth Amendment rights regarding searches and seizures seem to continually be eroding, and law enforcement has ever-expanding opportunities to search and seize residents, personal property, automobiles, and so on and so forth, to make it easier for law enforcement to attack, for instance, the drug problem. These are personal liberties. These are important, critical constitutional freedoms and rights that need to be protected and preserved for broader purposes. And I get worried that each time an appellate court finds an exception to a search and seizure, that is a further chipping away, and someday we're going to wake up in the not too near future and not have very many constitutional rights the way we knew them 50 years ago.
So our government's getting in our lives to the point now where it even impacts the innocent more so perhaps even than it does those who are found guilty.
Absolutely.
Well, you know, this system has got this strong sense of pressure on it all the time, and there seems to be no lack of business for you as a public defender. How do you wade through and pick the right kind of cases that ultimately take to trial versus those that you somehow plea bargain?
Well, the larger part of that control, as you probably recall, lies with the prosecutor. I mean, the prosecutor can recognize the value of a particular case or can not recognize the value of a particular case. We presently have an aggressive, overzealous, I believe at times, prosecutor who at times...
We'll get him on here for equal time.
I'm sure you will. Doesn't do as good a job as I would hope of evaluating and deciding which cases are going to go to trial. Consequently, the won-lost rate of my office really is probably higher than it should be because members of the community are coming in and telling our prosecutor, you don't have enough evidence to convict this person, or what you've charged this person with is incorrect, or we're not going to find this person accountable for anything at all. And that is the worst case scenario because as we both know, oftentimes those persons should have been held accountable for something, maybe not what's been charged. But they should have been held accountable for something and not acquitted. So the prosecutor holds the key to having his own success rate, and we win probably more than we should.
And you hold the key to a few more answers to questions that we're going to ask you right after we take this break. We'll be right back. Welcome back to UPN Focus, and we've been getting some really intriguing insights here from David Cook, our special guest, the Chief Public Defender here in Marion County. You were talking about prosecutorial discretion a little bit, and that you mentioned that the peers or those who come together as jurors these days are really issuing the mandate about how we as a community are going to prosecute and defend those alleged of crimes. Tell us about juries, the jury selection process. What type of people are we getting in juries these days? Are they the same? Are they conviction conscious, or are they more defense oriented given the context of the political world we live in?
I've been doing juries in this community for, 22 years, I'm afraid. And one thing that I really believe in is the jury system. Most often, and I honestly can't think of any situation where I've taken a case in front of a jury, either as a defense lawyer or a prosecutor, that the people that come in to our courtrooms as prospective jurors in these cases aren't good, honest, civic-minded people who are interested in trying to do what is the right thing as it relates to these circumstances, these criminal circumstances that put in front of them. These people are persons who are kind of uprooted out of their daily lives and routines and come into, as you know, what can be a kind of an intimidating environment, sometimes talking about very intimidating topics and issues about lifestyles they're totally unfamiliar with very grave consequences. Oftentimes, not only that has happened to the victim, but happens to the defendant as well, and the consequences. And those people want to and try very hard to do the right thing. I'm pleased with our jury process. There has been concern expressed in Marion County, as there has been across the nation, about whether we select an appropriate cross-section of our community, and including minorities, to really represent our community on a jury panel.
David, is there ethnic and racial bias in our system?
Well, of course there is ethnic and racial bias in our system. For the most part, everyone that I see generally is trying not to do that. What I have come to realize is that we may well inadvertently discriminate and exhibit biases that we don't even realize that we're doing. And when I first heard that concept, I went, I don't believe that. But I do believe that now, and it has caused me to re-examine the way I look, think, talk about a lot of topics, not only internally with my office, but the way we approach juries. One of the concerns, as I had previously expressed, was finding a way to have an appropriate cross-section of our community and include all the proper cuts of the community that need to be included in it. What we did was take a look at our typical jury panels that are selected by voters' registration lists and learned that really there is not a representative percentage portion of the minority community, for instance African Americans, that should be represented on that panel. We, as part of we do more than just represent people at trials. I feel like that some of our obligation are to address some of these issues as well through our court system, to try and attack the jury selection process to make sure that there may be another way that we need to look at selecting juries as far as having people subpoenaed to come in. Maybe the voters' registration list doesn't provide
Maybe that's not the right way to do it.
Maybe that's not the right way to do it. So that is an area of jury selection that is of issue and concern right now, but people try very hard to get the correct information and do what's right.
Well, as Chief Public Defender, sure you're going to try some of those big cases. There's no doubt about that.
I have.
But you've got some administrative responsibilities. Tell us a little bit about your office, how it's set up, how someone can avail themselves of a public defender if, in fact, they are indigent, and some words about that.
Well, you know, it's interesting that the right to a lawyer in a criminal case comes to us only in 1963 by a case, Gideon versus Wainwright, with the United States Supreme Court. Many people are surprised when I tell them that you only had a right to have a lawyer only as late as 1963. And then it took many years for the United States Supreme Court and all the other national, federal, and state appellate courts to interpret what it meant to have a lawyer. It wasn't just a person who had JD or attorney behind their name. And many communities, ours including up until 1993, had an indigent legal service system that did not really provide quality, constitutionally mandated, effective representation of counsel. The attorneys prior to 1993 that provided public and indigent legal services in Marion County were one employees of the judges that they served. Conflict of interest in that type of arrangement is obvious. There were no controls on caseloads. There were no minimum or payments for these people. Consequently, they had overwhelming caseloads and disproportionately low salaries. That attracted very young people into the profession with little or no experience. There were no experience qualifications. So in 1993, there was a lot of discussion and an independent agency was created. So for the very first time in 1993, Marion County decided that we're going to have an independent agency headed by a director with their own budget, not a part of the court system, not a part of any other system, independent, to provide this service. And we began that with 8 full-time lawyers and about 10 or 15 support staff. Today I have 60 full-time lawyers, I have 89 part-time lawyers, and I have 50.
You're building an empire over there representing people in...
I have 50 support staff. We handled over 32,000 cases last year. We do all the death penalty litigation, and we do all of the direct appeals in Marion County. And so while I could be accused of building an empire, I rather think that what we have done in the last 4 or 5 years is recognize the obligation and the areas of responsibility and work towards appropriately staffing them with qualified lawyers who have appropriate support staff and human and fiscal resources to challenge the state's case and provide that constitutionally effective representation of counsel.
Who can get a public defender, David? Can anybody get a public defender?
Well, not anybody, supposedly. I found that increasing and improving the quality of the representation of the Marion County Public Defender's Agency is a double-edged sword to a certain extent. The better I make that office, or the better the lawyers make that office, the more the judges want us to represent their people, and the more abbreviated inquiry into an individual's indigency is done. You know, I've had some lawyers who come to me and say, my heavens, Dave, the guy works at GM Truck and Bus, he makes more money than I do. And we have a lot of ethical issues about saying bad things to our client about the court, or to the court about our client. So not everybody can receive a public defender. The fact is the private bar has pretty much priced themselves out of the market, of a real market, in representing people. We represent, in the major felony courts, 85% of the cases that are filed there, and misdemeanor and defelony we represent 65 to 70%. We represent all of the death penalty cases, 100%, and virtually 100% of direct appeals. So we do the majority of the criminal litigation. Not only do I have criminal litigation, I'm sorry, we have a blossoming civil division because the appellate courts find new and new areas where people are entitled to public lawyers. So in Title 4D, which are child support issues, which are not criminal cases.
You've got lawyers
termination
that are
of parental
working.
rights cases, CHINS cases, which are children in need of services cases. Anytime a civil judge decides that a person could go to jail for one of their contempt orders on a civil case, they're entitled to be represented by a lawyer, and at no cost if they can't afford one.
So Barry, you got to tell Jim that he can't get a lawyer, and not Dave Cook, not today. We're going to come right back for a few more questions with our guest right after these words. Welcome back to UPN Focus. We've been talking with our special guest, David Cook, Chief Public Defender of the Marion County Courts, and And a lot of people don't know this, but Dave Cook also has a celebrity as a child. His son is in the band of Matchbox 20, and
Yes.
their first album's gone diamond.
Yes,
So
that's
we got. So actually, he says, "Dad, when you get all this publicity, guess what? I can get it too."
You know, I'll just tell you one little funny story of all the years and the things that we've talked about that I've done in the criminal justice system in the last 22 years. I was at an interview with some appellate judges, and I became known as Kyle Cook's dad. So no, they've been very successful, and that's been a lot of fun.
Congratulations to him and you. Most difficult moment on either side, prosecuting or defending the case, David?
Prosecution was, I don't know whether the community remembers the Fred Sanders case where the police officers went on a dog off a leash call that ended up in a police officer being shot. And that was an extremely difficult case for the office, for the community, still is a difficult case for the community. The second most difficult case was, as a defense lawyer, I received an acquittal of a defendant in a death penalty case. And that was a difficult moment. Neither of those moments, although there was good professional judgments and work done in all those cases, were particularly moments to revel in. Anytime I got a conviction on a death penalty case, you're kind of left with mixed emotions about feeling a sense of accomplishment and doing a good job at the same time, the tragedy of everything that's happened, as well as the possibility that now another person may lose a life, is not something to, and that's all of those things which causes me to want to go have a bakery someplace or something like that.
But where is your fulfillment, David Cook? Where is your fulfillment?
Making sure that the system works and that justice is done in each case. From my perspective as a prosecutor, I wanted justice to be done too, and the right thing. And from this perspective, it's the same issue. It's just from another side of the fence. When I was on the state side, my job was to present the evidence and convince people beyond a reasonable doubt. This side is to make the state prove the case beyond a reasonable doubt. And it's making the system work, and that's what I find rewarding.
And that's our fulfillment and our reward too. We're hearing the definitive bottom line from our special guest, David Cook. We're going to see what's going on around our town with this week's community calendar.
Thanks, Milt. Here are some events in our area for you to focus on. The Circle City Corvette Club will host the first annual Corvette Car Show today at 9 a.m. The event will take place at Blossom Chevrolet on North Shadeland. There will be door prizes and refreshments. Proceeds benefit the Humane Society of Indianapolis. Here's a 500 Festival reminder for you. The Indianapolis Zoo will have special operating hours next Saturday, May 6, due to the mini marathon route on West Washington Street. The zoo will be open 11:30 a.m. and close at 6:30 p.m. to accommodate mini marathon traffic. And next weekend there will be a craft fair and flea market at the Hancock County Fairgrounds. Admission and parking are free, and there will be door prizes. If you'd like to let our viewers know about your event, let us know at least 3 weeks in advance. Send your event details to Community Calendar, care of UPN 23, 4551 West 16th Street, Indianapolis, Indiana 46222, or email us at upn23.com. Now back to you, Milt.
And please take advantage of all these wonderful opportunities right out here in our community. I want to thank our very special guest today on Focus, and that's David Cook, who is our Chief Public Defender of the Marion County Courts. Thanks for coming on our show, and we'll get you back here sometime with the prosecutor, and we'll stir it up. You have a great morning and weekend. We'll see you next week here on UPN Focus.